Hello, my name is Destiny, and welcome to my channel, Destined by Design for You. Today I'm giving my April update. Yes, very late because we are almost halfway through May, but I debated about holding off and just doing a May and April update. But there's been a few things that just keep tugging on my heart, and I feel like I need to share them. So for those of you who have been following my journey, in October of last year, I heard the Lord tell me, I want you to tell your boss that you are leaving in December. And after much wrestling, I was obedient and I left my job. And I have so much peace about that being the right decision, even though it didn't make sense, even though it was hard. It felt like the right decision, and I still believe that it was the right decision. And at the time, my biggest fear was not knowing what was next, or not having those doors that God had promised to open until after January or later. And that was a real stretching process for me. As I said, in March, it was unfathomable that I would still be in this place of waiting by the time we reach March, April, or May. But just in reflection, all I know for sure is that God told me that He wanted me to leave my job in December. And I don't believe God gives threats. He gives us warnings, but God doesn't make threats. And the words I heard that day were, "You're going to tell your boss you're leaving in December." And I was like, what? No. And the follow-up response was, you're either going to tell him, or you're going to have to give him short notice, or you're not going to have a choice. And even though I wrestled with that, and it wasn't an immediate decision made, in my heart, I believed it was what I needed to do, and I took the initial steps to try the spirits and see if this was of God. But making the official decision and actually going through with making plans to leave my job in December, that part was hard, because there was that fear of, what if I'm wrong? What if that wasn't God? What if God doesn't open those doors? And so that season from October to December was a wrestle. But God was faithful. He stretched me and grew me through all of that. And then as I entered into January, especially as I got into February, I had peace that I had made the right decision, even though it didn't make any sense. And so my waiting season truly began. And as we get into May, it's a real wrestle of, so why did I have to leave in December? Number one, the only thing God gave me any time frame on was that He wanted me to leave my job in December. And I did that. And the only other thing He made clear was that it needed to be done. And if I didn't do it of my own free will, something was going to happen that would require me to leave my job. And I believe that because I was obedient, I don't have to know what or you won't have a choice would be. Because I believe that because I walked in obedience, that I was guarded from whatever that was. But I was a teacher. And so logically, why couldn't I have stayed until May? There is that question. The first thing that comes to mind is, I genuinely believe that the person who took my position was meant to be in that position. While I wrestle with whether I should have went back in August at all, I didn't have any leading of the Lord to not go back to teaching that August. I debated about it and I prayed about it, but I didn't have any leading of the Lord not to continue in the position that I was already in. And so I started that year, and that year was filled with difficulties. I mean, the first week back, I was sick, which if you are a teacher, being sick is terrible. But being sick that first week when you have trainings, you have to get your classroom ready, and you have meet the teacher, that was insane. And there were just many other things like that this year that I faced. And it was by no means the hardest year I've ever taught. It was by no means the most challenging. But this year was different, where normally, even when I went through my burnout year 5 and 6, struggles would push me to draw nearer to God and to try harder and to try to grow and push past those things and find victory over the things that came against me or the struggles. This year was different. I do believe that there were people, either students or adults, that I needed to be there for from August to December. I cannot tell you who, I cannot tell you how, but there were different situations where I believe that God wanted me there. I also know that the person who took my position was not available to take my position at that time. It would have been someone totally different if I had not continued into August. And so one thing that stands out very clearly is that the person who stepped into my position, I was there for that season so that when it was time for me to leave, the door would be open for them to walk into the position they had for the rest of the year. I can't confirm that, but that's just the feeling I get, that that person was one reason why I had to go back in August and another reason why I had to leave specifically in December. And like I said, this wasn't my hardest year of teaching ever. I've been through burnout. I went through 2 years of it and it nearly destroyed me. But God was gracious. He brought me through. That was the 2 years that would have destroyed me. That if I was going to throw my hands up and quit, that would have been when I threw my hands up and quit. This was different. Yes, I faced frustrations. Yes, I wrestled with some burnout. But this year there was just that knowing that God was getting ready to take me out of teaching. Now, I believed that I would leave teaching when God opened one of the 3 doors that he had promised, and that would be my clear signal to, okay, it's time to step out of that position, whether that was for a certain time frame of the year or whether that meant I would finish the school year. I was not expecting to hear God say, I want you to leave your job in December with nothing else to go to. He didn't tell me what he wanted me to do next. He didn't tell me what I was supposed to do after December. And that was a hard place to be. Now, God has given me such peace that that was the right decision. I don't regret leaving in December. God made the way. He provided someone to take my position. He made it such a smooth transition. And even though I couldn't explain to everyone exactly what was going on, the people I was able to speak to just gave me more and more confirmation that this was what God wanted me to do. And so while what's next is still very much up in the air and all I have are hopes and promises, that I did the right thing and that I was walking in obedience to God seems very clear to me. Because one, I believe that that position needed to be held for that person who took over from me coming in January. I also believe that if I had stayed, it would have been disastrous. Something would have happened. God wasn't making a threat when he said, or you won't have a choice. He was warning me that now was the time to leave. And he was giving me the option to be obedient. But if I wasn't obedient, the decision was going to be taken out of my hands. I cannot confirm what that was, but like I said, I am just glad that I was obedient, and I don't know what the or you won't have a choice was. I can also say that since I've left, random things have come up that I would not have been able to do had I been teaching. Most of them seem not important, but beginning of February, I was sick for like 3 days. And if I had been teaching, it would have been absolute chaos because I had no idea when I was going to feel better. I was in bed, like 3 days of just laying in bed, barely able to lay there. Like I couldn't sleep. couldn't think. I just laid there and it was just rough. And that's not normal for me. I might get sniffles or a stomach bug or all that, but to be sick like that was a whole new level. For me, I almost questioned if I needed to go to the emergency room, but by the grace of God, after 3 days, I started feeling better, and by 5 days, I was back to myself. But had I been teaching, that would have been chaos. We have emergency plans for such occasions as that, but it's still very hard to suddenly need a sub, to suddenly need your team to pull your emergency plans. These kind of things happen, but coming in after the holiday break and having just got into the meat of the new year, the second half of the school year, that would have been really hard. There was also family events and trips and things that, had I been teaching, I wouldn't have been able to attend. One of my youngest siblings is still in school, and his spring break was the week before what would have been my spring break. Had I been teaching, I wouldn't have been able to go with them on that family trip. There's just been different events and different situations that popped up that, had I been teaching, I wouldn't either have been able to go, or it would have been very difficult to have gotten a sub to be able to go. You know, I had sub days, you can do sub plans, but anyone who's a teacher knows that making sub plans and all those things is hard. And usually you want to be able to plan those things in advance. And many of these things that were coming up, I wasn't able to plan in advance. Recently, I've had 1 and soon to be 2 graduations, and teaching, it would have been very hard for me to take off that many days in May for these celebrations and for different events that are happening this month, especially that last month of school. It's very hard to take time off. So while I don't really understand why exactly God had me leave in December, there are lots of things that I know that had I stayed, I wouldn't have been able to do. There's been some different trial periods, because one of the things that I felt led of the Lord to do was to cast my nets, which in this case meant try some different things that the Lord had been putting in my heart. I've made jewelry since I was young, and so I've had an Etsy probably since 2015, somewhere around there. But because I was teaching, other than the summer, I really didn't have a lot of time to dedicate to it. And I've gotten the opportunity to do vendor fairs and really focus on my shop. It's making minimal progress, but it's doing better than it's ever done in the last 10 years that I've had it. This year has been the most productive and the most profitable. So I got to try my hand at that. I got to do some new things and learn some new skills from that. I've also gotten to have kind of a crash course in homemaking. I have always been the one to clean the house and do those kinds of things, but now being home more, I had to kind of learn to juggle the stay-at-home life, how to manage my time. I got bits and pieces of that over the summer, but it's very different when you are over the summer as a teacher, because oftentimes you're trying to relax, trying to cram in a bunch of things, catch up on all the things that you weren't able to do over the year, and oftentimes you're planning for the next year. So summer usually has more of a focus. You're resting, you're relaxing, but you are also preparing for the next year. Now, I don't have a date that says this is when such and such is going to happen. I don't have a date of this is when I'm going to return to work. So it's been, trial and error of, okay, let's try this. Okay, let's try that. I felt led of the Lord to start doing the YouTube channel. And, the first video, I was absolutely terrified. And now I'm starting to feel more comfortable. It's still a struggle. I am still brand new at this, but I do see myself growing. I've also been able to help more with my siblings and my nephews and nieces. I've been tutoring them and just doing different things. So it's almost like I've had this crash course in homemaking. I'm not taking on the full responsibility of everything in the household, but I've dabbled in cooking more. I've dabbled in, working with the kids on their homework. Just little mini lessons in managing different things. And my role at church, well, I've always been on the worship team, and currently I'm leading our worship team. I've been able to do it a little differently. I can actually start talking about adding new songs, where before that was just, a lot of time consuming issues where we hadn't been able to. So while my time's still full, I haven't just been lazing around. My pacing is slower. And so it's been interesting where I've had to learn how to slow down, but I've also had to learn how to manage my time in a different way. Because when I was teaching, you had a set schedule. You didn't have control of your schedule. You had control of how things went within certain blocks of time, but your schedule was dictated for you. And so now I've had to manage my own schedule, learn to deal with interruptions that require me to drive somewhere or to go somewhere. It's just been very different. So while it's hard for me to be in this place of waiting because I'm ready, or believe I'm ready for what's next, I can definitely see where the me in January is not the same as the me now, because the me in January would have flipped if I had known that I would be still at home, not working, still waiting all the way in May, because me in January was believing and trusting in God, but very nervous and very anxious because I couldn't see where we were going from here. I couldn't see how I could not work for 5 months. That seemed unthinkable. And again, the Lord has just been faithful through it all. What I thought would be too difficult, what I thought would be impossible, He's already done. And while I don't have those 3 promises fulfilled yet, I believe that this has been a time of preparation in a way that I couldn't have been prepared when I was working full time. Because as much as I loved my job and I had a passion for my job, it was all consuming. I spent most of my time at work, and while I had learned to dial back and not bring work home, it still was all consuming, and I was exhausted. Again, the exhaustion, the burnout, none of that was why I left. I'd been through far worse, and the Lord had brought me through. But because the Lord said, I want you to leave, I left. And that was a big step of faith for me. And my faith is still being stretched because I still believe for the 3 things that God has told me He's bringing. And for those who are curious, I call them my 3 M's. They are miracles, marriage, and ministry. And when the Lord leads me, I'll elaborate a little more on what those are and what those mean for me. But those are the 3 promises that He gave me. I believe it was last year. And I still believe that I'm going to see those things come to pass. And I keep getting confirmations and encouragement that He's going to do these things, but He's going to do them in His time. And what He's definitely shown me is His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. He has been stretching me and growing me and bringing me in places that are not comfortable. And I know that it's because He is doing something in me and because He's doing something for me. And one of the things that I keep feeling over and over again is that when God fulfills these promises, I'm not going to be able to take any credit for them, because it will be very obvious that it was the hand of God that did these things. It won't be because I worked hard, or because I was a good person, or because I did X, Y, and Z. Yes, I was obedient, but even my obedience couldn't have forced these things to happen. God is just preparing me for when He opens these doors, because these are the doors that He has chosen for me, and these are the doors that He wants me to walk through for my good, for the good of others, and for His glory. And so that's where I'm at. I definitely tell you, it is a weird place to be, but I am thankful to God that I'm here. I'm thankful to God what He's brought me through. It has not been an easy journey, but it has not been a difficult journey. He's definitely held me through it all. And I'm just amazed at how much He has worked on me throughout this process from October all the way to now. Because like I said, from October to January, if you had told me that I would not be working until May, I probably would have flipped out, because that didn't make sense. But no matter how much I wrestled with it, no matter how much I was like, God, I don't understand, I knew that that was what He wanted me to do. And I could not have done it in my own power. I've been blessed with the resources. I've been blessed with the understanding of my family. I've been blessed with the support of friends and family that I could even do this. But God provided. I'm not having to beg for bread. I'm not having to worry about where my next meal will come from. The Lord provided in so many ways, and I'm grateful to Him for making the way. And as I told my dad, the only thing God told me was He wanted me to leave my job. That was the only thing He gave me that was clear cut. And the other things, I'm just having to wait on His timing. And as I've told people, I'm having to do my least favorite thing, which is wait. But I'm grateful to God that He is teaching me and training me and preparing me even in this waiting period. And He's making me stretch my faith, because the longer we go, the more it doesn't make sense. The more I wonder, what is next? What are we going to do next? But He's not giving me the next direction. What I've gotten is wait. What I've gotten is trust me. What I've gotten is I'm preparing you. What I've gotten is it will happen in my time. And for me, someone who loves to be busy, loves to do things, loves to help, not having any particular goal to work towards is hard. And all I can do is work on being obedient and doing what I feel led to do at this time. So for those of you who made it this far in the video, thank you for listening to my update. I look forward to hopefully giving a May update, but if not, then maybe closer to June. Keep praying for me and keep trusting in the Lord. Know that whatever He says He will do, He will do. And know that what He asks us to do doesn't always make sense. But make sure that you are following the leading of the Lord. Because if you're following His leading, He will make the way. But if you're doing it in your own power and in your own understanding, you will get in a mess. And I am glad that God is gracious and merciful, because He's definitely pulled me out of some messes in the past. But I hope that you will learn from my trials and my failures and my successes, and just follow the leading of the Lord and wait on Him. Don't make that next step until He has told you to, or until you know that that is what He wants you to do. And if it has to be a leap of faith, if it's something you have to walk in faith or try the spirits, He'll make it very clear that that's what He wants you to do. So keep listening for Him and following His lead. Until next time, I'll see ya.